If you're born lucky and you pay attention, it does. Overlook either one, odds are you're dead meat. Nature first. We're born with what our parents' genes give us. They couldn't do much about what they gave us to inherit, so that made me, then, a light-skinned African-American female infant. But a lucky one. I came into the kind of upper-middle-class world that your daddy can afford to give you if he could bring the ball up on the right like nobody's business, back when he was in his prime. His best years out on the floor in the NBA were over before the big money really started raining down, but the front office always treated him well, before and after he retired. My father's had a good life, and my mom didn't do too bad either. The interviewer identified her parents. Reginald Carpenter, point guard for the Fort Wayne Pistons in the late 40s and early 50s, and Evelyn Field, the Northern Thrush, a regular headliner at the Drake, Palmer House, and Ambassador West grills well into the mid to late 60s. Her signature song, a slow, torchy arrangement of You Belong to Me, done especially for her by Mel Torme. Which, in turn, made the odds pretty good that if I didn't get sick or hurt in a car crash or something, I would grow up, and if I did, I'd be a light-skinned black woman, and in fact, that's what I did. Because my father and my mother were comparatively well off, in the course of growing up, I got a good education, private schools, music lessons, and so forth, which meant that when I met my future, first husband, we were both in college, headed, we expected, for professional careers. When I graduated from Brown back in 1965, Ray was 2 years ahead of me, Providence 63. If you had that respectable kind of life in mind, you did things by the book, and that was especially true if your skin didn't happen to be white. If you knew it was good for you anyway, and Ray and I both did. 14 years later, when we parted company, I'd built my whole legal career and reputation as Barry Foote, not Carpenter. So when we got divorced, I was willing enough to let Raymond loose, but not to let go my share of his name. I kept the education that my parents gave to me, and I kept Ray's last name as well, 'cause that's how and what I became what I am now. Professionally, that is, as a partner at Butler & Corey, first female black lawyer they ever hired, also the first black to ever make partner, both of which events in my life without doubt have left deep imprints on me. I'm certainly not the same woman I was when I came east to Brown, not the same as the one who came out of Georgetown Law so long ago, needing a job where her husband was, which happened to be here in Springfield. Ray'd gone to work at Valley Bank, right out of the Wharton School, and I was able to get a very good job here, not only because Ray'd made his share of contacts around town, but also because I had one of my own. I knew Bob Pooler from Georgetown. He laid the groundwork for me at Butler Corey. The firm didn't hire me because I'd known Bob in law school. He was 2 years ahead of me. But the fact that I knew Bob had a lot to do with how I got the first interview. So that's what I mean about nurture. Everything that's happened to me has made an impact on me, made me a different person from the one I used to be. I think, at least I hope, I've become a better one who got that way because she learns from experience. What I've learned and the people I've known are parts of what I am today because of the way I grew up. The interview had taken place in the dramatically modern, soaring Fieldstone and Redwood home Foote shared with her second husband, the internationally known artist Eric Hedges. It was set on a ledge off a private road off South Street near Tillotson Hill, overlooking the Cobble Hill Reservoir in Blandford. Eric and I first met at a solo show of his at the Ainsworth Gallery in Boston. Seems like it must have been 100 years ago. Ray'd gotten involved with a group of businessmen and banking people here and down in Boston who were trying to buy a dilapidated old racetrack out in Hancock. There'd been a big scandal. Word went around the New York Mafia was behind the original deal. Some people went to jail, and those who didn't, the people who had originally built the track, ended up going into bankruptcy. No one could find a buyer, so it ended up the town took the property for unpaid taxes. And there it sat, weeds growing all over, buildings falling apart. Ray and the people he was with were convinced it still could be a moneymaker, so their idea was to buy it cheap, rebuild it, and then either sell it to someone else or else reopen it and run it themselves. Warren Corey, one of the senior partners at Butler Corey, was involved with the group, and that year I was working for him. All of us were in Boston for something connected with it, licensing hearings or something, and and after the hearing, I went to the gallery. I'd always admired Eric's work, and that's how we met. I'm the only one who gained anything from that racetrack project. The deal itself fell through. Now, Eric, he looks at things from the artist's perspective, and that's had an influence on me, affected how I see the world. And again, that's what I mean, about how we're the sum of our experience, what we are. The text of the interview was illustrated by several photographs, one of her in a judicial robe, another of her at her desk in her new chambers, 3 showing her at home, casually dressed in a tawny, cowled sweater and fitted jeans, her black hair and a shiny page boy framing her slightly feline face. Eric had said she'd done a good job and should be very pleased, and she had said, "The photographer did a good job, I grant you that, but I don't think I did." Do I really talk like that, say fatuous things like that to people I don't know? Cripes, I sound like such a phony there, like the way Ray used to, accepting one of his semi-annual awards for being such a wonderful house nigger. It does the job, though, Eric had said, and he had been correct. The profile made her seem to deserve the distinction she had achieved. Sandy Roby opened the door and came in, a file folder in his hand, deducing from the thunk, the fact that she was still seated at the table, and the pleased expression on her face, what she'd just done with the lunch bag. "You know, Judge, you really should let us get you one of those wastebasket backboards," he said. Roby tried hard to be cheerful. Preparing to turn 40 was a sour portion for him. He believed that at 165 he was about 12 or 15 pounds overweight. His wife disagreed, much too gaily, he thought, saying he ought to lose closer to 20. The Rogaine with minoxidil that Foote had encouraged him to obtain and apply 2 weeks before had not visibly arrested, much less reversed, the gradual but alarming recession of his coarse reddish hair. His dentist had admonished him to see a periodontist for attention to what he diagnosed as advancing gum disease that otherwise would leave him toothless before 50, unless I have the good sense to die first. "Backboard, huh?" she said. "What do I need with a backboard? Swishers are all I put up. Now, what kind of nonsense do you bring in here that's going to get us all distracted this fine autumn afternoon from already pressing business?" Roby had put the folder on the table, sat down, and tapped it once. "Just one small matter, Your Honor," he said. "Shouldn't take much time at all. U.S. Attorney's got a balky witness. This grand jury corruption investigation he's only been hinting at discreetly to the papers for about a year or so. Guy's lawyer says if they bring his client in, he's going to tell him to claim he'll incriminate himself if he talks. The U.S. Attorney's granted him use immunity, but he says that isn't good enough. Says if it's not transactional, the U.S. Attorney will use the testimony to get leads to other evidence, then turn around and use that to cut his client's head off. So the U.S. Attorney, the assistant's Mr. Warmth, Arnie Bissell, wants you to give him and his guy a hearing. Tell them the USA doesn't lie to people, and so use is good enough, and his guy has got to talk." "Bissell wants me to tell this lawyer and his client that the U.S. Attorney's office never fibs?" she said, widening her eyes. "I do that, and God'll surely strike me dead." Roby laughed. "Bissell says it shouldn't take long, 10 minutes at the most." "10 minutes?" she said. "Why should it take any minutes? Just do it like always. Have him send up a written order, and I'll sign the thing on the spot. Then have him threaten the guy. If he stays coy, then we'll have a hearing. What you and I want to do here this afternoon is get back to the late Mr. Nick Hardegrew's really lousy last weekend." "Mind telling me what you thought of what got put in this morning?" Roby said. "When the girl said he had his hands folded in front of him and his head down like he's saying grace, and that he stayed that way all the way down?" "I don't know," the judge said. "Either he was saying his prayers, or else he had gone into some kind of trance. Blissed out completely. Or maybe he was paralyzed, panicking, and froze when he realized what was happening. He had to have known it when his chute didn't open. And to have known what he had to do next. This wasn't his first jump. Why didn't he pop the backup? I suppose at that velocity it's pretty hard to hear what somebody else is yelling at you. Pull the reserve chute, for God's sake. So maybe he couldn't hear the others. But she said that she could hear them yelling. That's why she didn't yell herself. Makes it seem as though he should have heard them too." "Unless he didn't want to," Roby said. "Maybe what happened was what he intended to have happen. Nobody we've heard yet seems to